Thank you. I'm blushing now. That's, and as I've said to more than one person today, please don't set the bar too high. But I'll try my best. The last speaking slot at any event is arguably the best or the worst, right? I mean, it depends. It's not in the middle. That's the bit we're clear about. It's either the best or the worst. And the thing is, you prepare a talk long before the events ever happen. So you have no real option to change anything, right? So there's the danger that what you're going to present, people are going to sit there and go, I've already seen that, already done that, or what the hell has this got to do with the rest of the conference? I hope we don't fall into that trap today, but what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, is sort of close this conference out by, this is going to sound self-contradictory, but bear with me. On the one hand, really looking out, right? Looking out into the future, where does our industry go? Where does information governance go? And at the same time, maybe question where we're really at, right? Because I think we're in a different place than maybe some of us might think. That sounds like a bit of a conundrum in a sense, but so the big question I'm going to ask here today, and I hope you go away thinking about today is, are we actually leading or are we following? Do we chase problems or are we there to fix them in the first place? And just in the car driving down, I was thinking to myself, this is maybe a terrible analogy, but something must have come into my ear on NPR, on the radio, whatever, listening. And I was just thinking, you know, do we want to be there when the ship is built? Do we want to be there when it's designed? Do we want to actually play a part in that? Or do we want to wait until it's out at sea, it's got leaks, it's sinking, it's a tragedy, and we're brought in to tell everybody why it went wrong? And all too often we find ourselves in that latter position. Also, sadly, knowing that even though we will tell people exactly how it all went wrong, nobody's actually going to listen to us. So the question is, do we want to be leaders or followers? So the focus today really, that's me, as you may have noticed. It looks really big, but is on blockchain and AI, so artificial intelligence and blockchain. And those are two things which frankly don't come up very often in records management or information governance discussions, and I think they should be left, right, and center at the moment. And really what I'm interested in, what my company's interested in, and what I've been doing for years now is really focusing on change. Because I trained as a psychotherapist, and if you're a psychotherapist, don't worry, I'm not, but whatever, okay? I trained as a psychotherapist, an analytical psychotherapist, and what you're interested in is change, right? You know, somebody's there, they've got a problem in very basic terms, right? Well, how did they get there? You know, what happened? And one thing you learn as a psychotherapist or as a business analyst is you can only know so much. You can never really know the whole story. And the other thing you learn is that even though change seems so obvious, right? Something tragic happens, somebody dies, or something wonderful happens, somebody is born, or you move house. We think of those things in terms of change. That's when change happened. But it's not really like that, right? Cultural change, real change sort of happens whilst we weren't looking. We suddenly look back and we realize how much has changed. If any of you here have kids who've just gone to college, like me this September, you think, what the hell is going on? How the hell is she going to college? Right? Change happens, and I think that's what's happening in our industry. That's why I'm going to focus today on artificial intelligence and blockchain, simply to use them as illustrations, if I'm being frank with you, of how I think things aren't in the future, they're in the present, and we're not really there. We're not part of the story. So just to go back on that slide, truth must be found in reality, not systems. This is the other thing. We're already at a stage where we trust technology far more than we should. Really silly example, but I think it illustrates my point. I hope it does anyway. I was in a supermarket not too long ago. And I think I bought some cheese, some eggs, some milk, dairy products in the main, as you picked up. And the woman behind the counter, it doesn't matter that it was a woman, but the person behind the checkout said to me, "That'll be $87, please." 87 and change. And I said, "No, I don't think so." And she said, $87. And I said, "Even if this were Vermont craft cheddar, it's not $87. Okay? And I'm English, so my temper gets up pretty quick. It's not $87. And she's just literally looking at her screen, pointing at it. It says $87. In Britain, there's a famous comedy show where the catchphrase is, "Computer says no." And the computer says no. And that's it, right? You know, computer says no. We're already at that point with things. By the way, the supervisor eventually came over and says, "Oh, not again, Julia," fixes it for me. And the checkout woman is staring at me as I leave, like, "You got off easy, mate." The computer said it was $87. Truth must be found in reality. My reality is I didn't have $87 worth of stuff, right? Now, the reason I'm saying this is that in a world where artificial intelligence is already everywhere. Has anybody got an Alexa or Echo, something like that at home? Right, so we interface with that creepy thing every day. I do, right? It is creepy. She sometimes butts into the middle of a conversation and says, "Canines," and you shut up, Alexa. But she's listening all the time, right? She's listening all the time. She's processing. And what she's actually doing is she's learning all the time. All the time she's listening for a reason. It's not really to answer your question, it's to gather data, right? So we're gathering more and more data. And we've got to the point where we believe that if the machine says so, it must be right. But it's not all the time. It really isn't. And that's where I think it gets interesting. So I'm currently working with a great friend of mine. I've worked with him for many years, and it's just awesome. He is truly an AI machine learning expert, and he explains it in a way that even I can understand. And I'm going to come back to the complexity of it in a second, but just bear with this in mind. The sheer complexity of what's happening with artificial intelligence at the moment is arguably its downfall. Arguably its downfall. Now, will it actually have a downfall? We don't know, okay? But it is not as accurate as people think. I want to come back to that and why that's important for information governance. But for me, it all began with a moment of accuracy. So this is the early 90s. I was an artist, believe it or not. I was a professional artist. I had exhibitions. I did all of that. What that actually translated to was I was hip. I had loads of hair. I was really cool. I was so freaking broke, it was unbelievable. And I got a temp job in oil and gas, in document control, as it was called. I hated it. I hated it. I was ashamed. Oh my God, I'm sat behind a desk. I should be in a gallery somewhere, or a coffee shop or something, whatever. And one Saturday morning when I was doing overtime, because I really, really needed the money, a phone call came through. And there was a guy, we didn't have cell phones, right? This was a satellite call that was telling me, this is really bad. And in short, what had happened is an oil tanker had actually arrived at a platform. It's not as dumb as it sounds. Just like you fill up your car at the gas station, tankers do that too, right? They go in and a big hose is plugged in. Well, somebody wasn't talking to somebody, communication wasn't going on, because you know how cars sometimes drive off and they've still got, same thing, not good, right? And anyway, and he's saying to me, you need to find this information for me. And I was truly in a panic, right? First of all, I didn't even know what he was talking about. But very quickly, I actually did find the information, to my surprise. Why? Because we followed a very strict numbering system, a very strict filing system. I did find it. And I'm talking him through what the shapes look like on the drawing. I have no engineering background whatsoever. I'm explaining to him the data, and they stopped the oil flowing. And I was hooked from that moment. Who wouldn't be? I just saved the world, at least the North Sea anyway. And I've never been given an award or any credit for that. But that aside, I still feel good. And it was an amazing moment. That was an amazing moment. And I remember looking around this place I hated and still sort of did, but quite admired the amount of money I was earning and started to look at it in a very different light. And so, although obviously I was going to carry on being an artist and was going to drop this job in no time, 10 years later, still doing it. And then one of the reasons I was still doing it, apart from the money, that was a big factor. But one of the reasons I was still doing it was I saw how terribly some other people were doing it. It was a tragedy to watch poor information management, poor document management, poor records management, watching stuff being stuffed into boxes and sent off to archives when the person knew full well that the right contents were not in that box. Yeah, really dumb stuff. But then I became a business analyst. I became a business analyst. By the way, I should have maybe paused before I said that. Business analysts and industry analysts aren't necessarily sociopaths, but it does help. And the fact is here, what I suddenly started to realize, particularly when I was now seeing the tech world, if you like, from a different angle, right? I was seeing it from Silicon Valley. I was seeing it from investors. I was seeing it from developers, not just the end user's perspective. And suddenly you start to realize that, well, yeah, you can take a high and mighty view of what's right and wrong, but the truth is everybody thinks they're right? Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing. If you've ever been involved in a lawsuit, I have, right? If you've ever been involved in a lawsuit, you know what? I don't know if every time, but most of the time, the perpetrator genuinely believes that they did nothing wrong. I have volunteered in prisons for the last 15 years. I have met many murderers. I'm not proud of that, nor are they. But the fact is, I've met many people who've done some terrible things. I'm not making excuses for them. But by God, can they make excuses for themselves? And that's an extreme, but we all sort of do it. And where we get into problems here is that when we start thinking of computer systems, be that artificial intelligence, an ERP system, any kind of reporting system, whatever it is, we believe that there's a right or a wrong, a black or a white, a 1 or a 0. It's either correct or it's not. But the real world isn't like that. The real world just isn't like that. And we can come up with all sorts of ways of justifying things. The problem is, at the moment, where are the professionals who are guiding the development of those new tools? This kind of technology is coming on at such a pace, and we are not part of that conversation to a large degree. And people are simply working on the assumption that it is accurate, it is correct, it is so, when in fact, oftentimes, it's not. So another way of looking at it is just very simply, what you did with your data. You know what you did with your data. Yeah, everybody does, or information or knowledge or whatever. So you think you know what you did with your data, what your customers and your employees actually did, and what the regulars or attorneys think you did. Everybody has a different view on this. Everybody has a different view. And the thing is, none of them are really wrong. Okay, so sort of painting a picture of confusion here, hopefully, because it is a very confusing world we live in. But if we look at the explosion of AI, very simply put, and by the way, I have slides coming up here. We've got a lot of stuff on them. I am not going to read down every line. They're really here if you want to take them home and make some use of them. So just give you that as a heads up right from the get-go, really. But if we just wind the clock back 10 years ago, artificial intelligence was really damned expensive, right? To get access to big data sets was really hard and really expensive. So what people did was they used small data sets. And for the non-technologist, I apologize, I'll try and keep this as sort of basic as I can. But the bottom line is it was an extremely expensive thing to do. You needed to pay really a lot of money to a very sort of hardcore group of people who knew what they were actually doing. And you had to build out these incredible mathematical algorithmic models. Today, just 10 years, like in less than a decade, that paradigm has shifted completely. It's cheap, open source. You can get access to tons of data models for nothing or next to nothing. Cheap computing. You can literally sign up to Amazon Web Services right now with a swipe of a credit card and have access to unlimited processing power and storage power. Simple algorithms, really simple algorithms. A lot of them, again, open source. Lots of people who know what they're doing. It's changed totally. Now, there's a lot more than that going on. But the reality is, it's suddenly flooding in to applications, document applications, records applications, all sorts of customer experience. Artificial intelligence is just coming in. It's cheap and easy, and it's simple to use. And although, you might look out there and say, well, I don't really see it. The fact it's there, and you're not supposed to see it, right? That's the whole point, yeah? The world has really changed. By the way, if anybody gets the titles on the top, good for you. Gil Scott Heron, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Okay. You should check it out. It's really good. The fact is, yeah, absolutely. The fact is we're moving, though, if we take it a different way, and just to take a philosophical level, if you like, we're moving with business applications from where it was really just basically simple logic, right? Doing math, adding columns up, right? Balancing two columns against one another, making a good stab at something, to systems that can really do very complex reasoning. They're not just doing a sort of, oh, here's a good guess. They're actually taking into account a whole lot of variables. So if we think about it in terms of artificial intelligence, just a few years ago, it was brilliant that IBM Watson beat grandmasters at chess. That's nothing compared to artificial intelligence recently that beat poker players. Because if you think about it, poker players, it's not just a game of logic. It's mainly about lying, bluffing, whatever. Yeah, there's an awful lot of chance. So AI has moved on really, really fast here. And it's starting to make more and more decisions in business. So I've actually got a really funky infographic that's got sort of spacemen and spaceships on it. And if anybody wants a copy, you're welcome. I just couldn't get it ready in times for this. So this is a really dull version of the same thing. But if you think of artificial intelligence, don't think of it as a sort of a single thing. It's really a continuum of ideas. There's so many different things that can happen. And at the very basic level, we've got what people are now calling robotic process automation. Probably the one, if I'm being frank with you, the one you need to be most worried about. I'll come back to why you want to be worried. But going up to really incredible sort of deep processing, self-healing, self-learning, some amazing stuff. The thing is, it is a continuum because all of these things are value. And if we take this very basic one, we'll just spend some time just on this very, very basic one here, RPA, robotic process automation. Really all it's doing is maybe, oh, we have somebody in our office who inputs this data from this screen, puts it into this one, takes it off this sheet of paper. Well, guess what? I can automate that real quick. Yeah? Well, that sounds cool, but that's an awful lot of white-collar jobs just going down the drain here. I mean, that's the reality. And if I hear one more person on the media or anything say, well, it won't really work like that, what's going to happen is those people are going to move into and be able to free up their time so that they can do some more creative work. I mean, BS. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. If you only need 2 people to do the job previously of 10, guess what? 8 people have a problem, okay? So that's a reality we need to be dealing with. Probably not the topic for today, but nevertheless, that is happening at an incredible rate. This week, and it's hand on heart, this week, I heard something quite amazing, and I wish I could tell you which company it involved. One you would all know, let me just say that. But they have been doing this kind of basic scan, capture of a document, etc. You know, the basic sort of capture world, for those of you familiar with that. They've been doing it for years. Years. Cash cow for them Yeah, not something anybody's much interested in, excuse me. A couple of years ago, they started playing with robotic process automation. Sales teams been going out. In the past year alone, that business, that unloved part of their business, has grown tenfold. It is on track to grow more than that in the coming year. That is huge stuff going on there. And that is impacting white-collar jobs, left, right, and center. Will continue to do. There's even talk now about whether it should be taxed. It won't be. But there's talk about whether it should be taxed. I mean, so there's a big thing going on here. Again, where the problem comes here with these kind of things is we assume that not only they do it more efficiently and more accurately, but we take it a step further and we say, it's always accurate. It's not human. Always does it right. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And whatever level of AI here, without diving into technical details here, the fact is these are really complicated systems. Even the most basic are complicated, right? But as we move up you hear people use terms like neural networks. Well, in my world, I do anyway, right? But people use terms like neural networks. Actually, at some levels, there's a dozen or more neural networks interfacing with one another. The fact is, it's incredibly complex. And what people are already finding out, developers are already doing, it's incredibly easy to game early on, right? Artificial intelligence is only as good as the quality of the data it's given. It's only as good as the quality of data it learns on. If you lie to it really early on, it doesn't know. Okay? So if we think about it this way, what's actually happening, and again, this is not one to talk to in detail, but maybe if you to take away if you want, it's not just about one company using an artificial intelligence program in its company's system. It's actually about companies sharing data. And that's increasingly happening. You're seeing banks, financial services, healthcare is a big one, where they're anonymizing and sharing data, putting it into a big pool and saying, hey, I think I can analyze and get more value out of this than you, but let's share it together. They're doing amazing things together. However, think about the governance implementing, nobody is discussing governance implications here. Nobody, right? I'm looking at so many of these things going on, and information governance, governance in general, other than just is it clean and good data, is not a part of the discussion. I think that's pretty scary. Because once these things really learn, once they're 2 or 3 years in, if there was something fundamentally flawed at the beginning, there is no way of unraveling that. And it's not just about the data quality, it's about the ethics, it's about the morals, it's about the laws, it's about the regulations, it's about being compliant with those regulations. We have those for a reason, right? We have laws and regulations for a reason. Somebody said the other day, why do we still need a law against slavery? I think there's a good reason why. Because if we didn't have it, guess what might happen, right? There is a reason for these things, right? If the fact is, if you're building highly complex, self-learning, self-healing systems that are accountable to nobody, that have no moral compass whatsoever, I really seriously wonder where we end up. But somebody has to be involved in that. Somebody has to be part of that discussion. This, thanks in large part to Mr. Steve Weissman over there, we put together a little while back. It's just a very simple thing on blockchain. It's a very simple thing. Trust me, if you see a real blockchain architecture, this is really simple. So I don't want to go into this in detail. Again, this is just for you to take away. But the bottom line is blockchain, if you have heard of it at all, which there's no reason you would necessarily have done so, you would probably have heard of it in the context of Bitcoin as an alternative currency, right? The favored currency of drug dealers, basically, or whatever, okay? Arms dealers as well. Anybody who's doing something illegal love Bitcoins. The fact is, that is not what we're looking at here, okay? So Bitcoin runs on a thing called blockchain. Blockchain, in very, 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 very simple terms, is a totally distributed system, okay, that is almost impossible to break. It's almost impossible to cheat. So if you have a copy of a document, I'm dumbing this down, and if anybody really wants to talk about this, that's fine, we can talk about it afterwards. But if I have a copy of a document, it is essentially stored and verified in hundreds, if not thousands of locations, pretty much at the same time. And if I make a change to it, that change is picked up everywhere. You can't really cheat this system, is the whole point of it. It has enormous use in information governance. Because one of the key things is this the right document? Is it really the right document? Are you absolutely sure it's the right document? Nothing could possibly have changed to it. It's definitely the original. It's the right information at the right time. Just that audit trail capability alone is absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. We're not talking about people replacing document management, records management systems, and SharePoint. None of that. We're talking about an architecture going at the bottom, which can verify things, stamp them in a way that just you cannot argue with. I'm sure everything can be cheated ultimately. But at the moment, this is way and above anything else that's out there. The thing is, people have been saying, but it's very early days, why would our industry of information managers be really wanting to get involved with this now? Why the hell would I, whether I work for IBM or I work for small, why would I want to be involved with this? Why would I have any interest in it? Well, the thing is, it's being run basically by consortiums. Okay, we're going to come to the consortiums in a second. The fact is, it's already happening, is my point. And remember I said at the beginning, do you want to be involved in the design of the ship at the beginning and make sure it really is sound and fit for purpose? Or do you want to wait until it's out at sea and it's all a little bit late? People are building these systems right now. People that I counted yesterday, and I have absolutely no doubt there are many more that I missed. I counted 42 different consortiums of major companies pulling together to build on the blockchain. Legal, healthcare, shipping, financial services, construction, engineering, oil and gas, you name it, they are already working on this. They're not working on it because they want to be compliant. They're working on it because they want to save money and they can get transactions done more quickly, right? So if you're a ship at sea taking something from Tokyo to LA, I don't know where this number came from. It could even be wrong, but I'll go along with it anyway. 70 to 75% of your costs are actually down to paperwork. That's why you're sitting at sea so long, because you've got to clear every piece of paperwork for everything that's in every container, including the ship itself and every port of call. If that was done instantaneously via the blockchain and your contracts were definitely correct and nobody could possibly dispute it, your costs are plummeted. That's why they're all over this, okay? The thing is, where are we involved in that discussion? Contracts, legalities, regulations. Why aren't we involved in that discussion? Maybe some of us are, maybe I'm wrong. But, you know, at the moment, to go back to that slide, what did you do with what do you think you did with your data? What do your customers do with your data? You know, what did the regulators and attorneys? Well, in this future world, everybody's guess is as good as another's, right? Because the fact is, we're just relying on the technology to tell us. We don't know if it's actually right or wrong. And in many cases, it's not going to be right. I honestly believe some of these instances with both the blockchain and with AI in the future, I think we are really going to find some sinky ships. I'm absolutely convinced of it. And trust me, you know, just this week alone, talking to AI, machine learning developers, they're in no doubt either. They're in absolutely no doubt either. They cannot believe the amount of trust people are putting in the things they are building. So I thought, so the weirder guy, not me, the other one on the slide earlier on, is a guy called Joseph Beuys, and he was hugely influential for me in my arty phase. And he produced a revolutionary manifesto, so I thought I'd have a crack at one myself. But consortiums, that's what's leading the discussion. A consortium is nothing more than a group of firms within your industry. Whatever industry you're in, whether it's the public sector or anything, there will be a consortium in your industry. If you're an information government professional, you should be getting involved. You should be contacting them, you should be reading on it. Get involved, because they're not reaching out to you, they're not reaching out to us. So that has to happen the other way. And they will value it. That's the interesting thing. People are looking for input. So join them. Traditional governance is essential. Again, there's a reason for regulations. There's a reason to be compliant to them. When I started out as an industry analyst in Europe, a long time ago now, it was incredible in London how many US firms were suddenly launching websites and commerce sites in Europe and it immediately being taken to court because they were in breach of just about everything that was possible. And they couldn't get their head around it, but this is the internet age. We cannot be held to the old standards. And we're sort of back at that silly stage again. If I get my technology far enough advanced, what are you going to do about it? That is pretty much the attitude, trust me. What are you going to do, right? Once my technology is totally in control of trading this, managing that contract, managing this piece of money, managing your healthcare records, what are you going to do? Tough, too late. So challenge that. Compliance shouldn't be an afterthought. Compliance to regulatory requirements should be there at the get-go, not once it's already breached. AI and blockchain, they are actually real and they're already making an impact. We just don't see it. Like when we think of artificial intelligence, we think of things like Alexa, right? We think of chatting to somebody on a website that we suddenly realize isn't actually real. Hopefully that's a shopping site as opposed to something else, but whatever, but you're chatting to somebody on a website, you think, oh, damn, I'm talking to a robot here, okay? There's that visible side of it, but the fact is it's creeping in everywhere, in almost every back office transaction. So be a part of that change, actually get involved in it, find out what your organization's doing, or lead that if you're in a position to do so. And our opportunity is actually in that transition state. People are building now. It's still early days. They're going at a fast pace. If we can get involved in that, then I think we really have huge value to bring. And I think there's huge interest in us being involved in those discussions. I'm not saying they're easy. It's easier said than done. I get that. But it'd be really cool if we were leaders, not followers. And I have absolutely no idea how long I've been speaking, but I suspect for almost too long. But just to round up here very quickly, I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about blockchain. I could have talked about other things, but my key thing here is that as an industry, I've been a part of this in one way or another, right, for a long time. And the fundamentals have never changed, and I don't believe they ever will. But we have to change. We've got to adapt to what's coming, right? I remember, and I'm not going to go into details because it may insult some people here, and possibly quite rightly so. But I remember, well, let's say it's 15 years ago at a certain conference, talking about email and emails as records, and this certain conference being up in arms. I clearly did not understand their job. Emails are not records, Alan. They never will be. It's not possible to manage them. I don't know what you're talking about. People should print them out, then they become a record. It's funny how you remembered things like that. I just remember thinking, for God's sake, you know, there's a rising tide here, and that's my whole point. There is a huge rising tide here. It will lift everybody, okay? But it's going to come crashing down too. They always do. Are we going to be a part of that? Are we going to actually mitigate? Are we going to be part of actually embracing some of these things rather than being scared of them? You don't need to learn how to code machine language, machine learning. You don't need to actually understand how mining in the blockchain works. You don't need to know any of that. You need to know what you know and apply that to this new world. Because what you know, they don't. And what they know, you don't. There's something there. And I think there's a real opportunity and a real future here. And with that, I guess I'm pretty much done. My slide isn't advancing, so I think I've probably been cut off or whatever. But he said something along the lines of, if you'd like to continue the conversation, that would be terrific. So thank you very much.